Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's IAP2 webinar. I would like to provide a very sincere welcome on behalf of IAP2 Canada and IAP2 USA and IAP2 Australasia to today's participants. My name is Amelia Shaw, and I am going to be your moderator. But first of all, we're going to get going really quickly with a little bit of a housekeeping, and I'm going to turn that over to Drew. He'll let you know how you can participate in today's session, as it's meant to be extremely interactive. So, Drew.
All right, we have a few ways you can take part in this. We invite you to take part in the polls that we'll be showing you throughout the presentation. It's a good way to interact. There are ways you can ask questions. You can put up your hand. There's a little hand icon on the on your panel in front of you there. Just click that, and at an appropriate time, Amelia will break in and hand the microphone over to you. So if you're comfortable with asking the question verbally, go ahead and do so. If you're not comfortable with that, we've got the question chat box where you can enter a question, and Amelia will break in at an appropriate time and read that, and our panelists will get back to you with the answer on that one. It's also intended to be just any kind of comments or suggestions you've got. Please put those into the question box as well, and we'll take it from there. We also will be recording this. This is for your professional development. It's a kind of a value add that we have here, and we'll have that recording posted within about 24 hours of the webinar. And then we also have a post-webinar survey that we'll invite you to take, and we'll circulate that along with links to the recording, to any collateral materials, any websites that our presenters happen to mention during this time. We'll send that all out to you in an email too, and then also post it on your respective affiliates' websites. So that's basically it. One more thing. We'll take care of muting and unmuting your microphones. You don't have to worry about controlling that, so we'll handle that on this end. And then when it comes time to ask a question or make a comment verbally, Amelia or I will take your microphone off mute and let you do it. But if you've muted your microphones right now, please unmute them, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, Amelia, I think that's pretty much it from this end.
Well, thank you very much. And as I said, we sincerely hope this will be very interactive, so we will definitely encourage you to ask your questions or raise your hand. So it's with real pleasure now that I get to introduce our two presenters today. Matt Crozier first. After more than a decade working in the government sector in the United Kingdom and Australia, Matthew co-founded Bang the Table 8 years ago with partners Crispin Butteris and Karthik Reddy. They were looking for a way to connect with the silent majority and to get past the lobbyists and usual suspects who often dominate traditional citizen engagement processes. Over the past 8 years, their citizen engagement software platform, Engagement HQ, has been used by millions of people around the world to connect with organizations who are making changes that affect their lives. Last year alone, Engagement HQ was used for over 2,500 citizen engagement projects in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the UK. Matthew has recently moved to Boulder, Colorado, where he has opened the first office in the USA. Senior Project Manager and Public Involvement Practice Lead for CH2M. She has also worked in public involvement with Metro, the regional government in the Portland, Oregon area. She specializes in designing and implementing decision-making strategies for complex, controversial transportation planning projects. She has wide-ranging experience managing complex, controversial, multimodal, transit, and active transportation projects in the planning and project development and leading public involvement efforts for corridor planning studies. Her planning projects are characterized by well-defined processes where stepwise decision-making and targeted technical efforts lead to implementable projects. Kristin has a knack for explaining complex technical concepts to people in the community as an adept facilitator, helping stakeholders explore issues and trade-offs to reach consensus-based decisions. Wow. Thank you both, Matthew and Matt and Kristin. It's with real pleasure that we turn this now over to you and ensure that we get people talking about what works and what doesn't work with online engagement. So Matt, we're going to turn it over to you, so we'll get that going. And Drew, just a quick question. Is there any poll questions that we need to do at the get-go, or are we diving right in?
I think at this stage we're diving right in, but Matt, maybe you can, or Kristin, maybe you can just let us know if you need to run a poll question right now.
Sure, I'm happy for you to run them whenever you're ready, Drew.
All right, well, let's go with the first one here, and Amelia, we'll just take this over right now.
All right, excellent. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much experience do you have with online engagement, with 1 being very little and 5 equal? So we'll just get people on the line to respond to that question. And Drew, let's shut this down. All right, so the results are 20% have a lot of experience, 22% at 2%, 43% at 3, 13% at 4, and 2% at 5. So it looks to me as though you've got a lot of experience on the line, Kristin and Matt. Do we want to do the next? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Amelia, I think you got that backwards. I think 20% say very little and 2% say lots.
Thank you. It's okay. It's morning. My apologies. I'm really pleased that you're on. It was a trick question, Matt. That's what we'll go with. It was a trick question.
It was a trick, and usually my suspicion in these things is that people are being modest, but I guess we have to take it at face value. Can you see my screen now, Drew, Amelia?
We certainly can.
Wonderful. All right, look, are you happy for me to take it away?
We are. It's all over to you.
Great, thanks. Well, look, thanks for the introductions. And what I've got up here for everyone is a broad agenda of some questions that Kristin and I thought that we'd try and tackle. But I think both of us are keen to hear your questions along the way, and are happy to be a bit diverted along the way. But I'm just going to kick it off by just talking a little bit about how to choose the right tool, because obviously this is something that taxes a lot of people along the way. So I've just prepared a couple of slides and got some things to show on this. If I could actually get my computer to advance. Sorry about this. Do it the long way around. So let's just paint a scenario. You've decided that you're going to add some online engagement. I don't want to go into great depth here on why you might choose to engage online, but broadly, it's usually to get more people into the room. And you're being pulled in all sorts of different directions in terms of which tool to choose. If you're working within an organization, you might have an IT manager who wants to cobble something together on WordPress. You might have an intern that wants to do it all on social media, and you might have someone in charge of the budget who thinks you can throw out something on SurveyMonkey or something for $5.50 or whatever it might be. But it's probably, if you're in this call, it's probably your job to think about the practice of engagement. And what I'd like to encourage you to do is think about the practice and ignore the technology for now. I think, first of all, you need to think about what are you trying to achieve, and how's the technology going to fit with overall what you're doing in your engagement process. And I think, generally speaking, your face-to-face engagement should lead this process. But, you know, when you're thinking about face-to-face engagement as IAP2 practitioners, it's highly unlikely that you use one tool all the time or one technique all the time. And it's highly unlikely that you ever go into a session or an event with only one kind of tool or technique up your sleeve. And I think you need to look at your online engagement in this perspective. Think about how it's going to complement your face-to-face practice, how it's going to fit in. You know, you can use online engagement to get more people physically in the room as much as anything, and to run the run-in to something and to do the aftermath of a face-to-face event. But I'd argue that once you've done this, once you've thought about it in this context, you're more than likely going to want not necessarily a tool, but something more like a platform. You're going to want to be able to use and deploy more than one tool in the life of your project. And I've just, and I do apologize for this slide. Somebody who was more graphically orientated than me would have turned this into a beautiful spectrum chart. But all I've come up with is a list. But I've just wanted to come up with a few thoughts, just as prompters for conversation really, on some of the online tools and techniques you might use at different stages in a process. I haven't used the IAP2 spectrum here, although in the past I've written blogs about, which tools you'd use at different points in the spectrum. I've kind of used more of a project timeline approach here, just to suggest a few ways you might engage. So, for example, at the start of a project, you might want to crowdsource ideas, do some ideation, and I might just, if I flick to a website and show you what I mean by that, this is an example of a brainstorming process where people's ideas are being posted and people can vote on each other's ideas. These sorts of tools are fantastic at the start of a project. They're not much use to you halfway through a project when you're beyond the ideas phase and you're wanting to discuss and get people's views on different ideas, but they can be really fantastic right at the outset to make sure you've got all the right ideas on the table. Storytelling, again, wonderful thing to do at the start of a project, and I'll show you a storytelling tool here. This is something where people are sharing their ideas about a trail network, and you can see they're sharing their photos. Someone's very proud of his pull-up there. And you can flip from story to story. These sorts of things give fantastic content. They're really nice ways in a whole variety of projects to get behind people's positions and actually understand where they're coming from. We, in our experience in Bang the Table, we came to storytelling through a national disability insurance scheme in Australia, where we were having debates about policy issues online, but we really couldn't understand why people were taking the position. So we asked them for their stories, and we had 297 stories from disabled people and their carers about why they were taking those positions. And these were really powerful and moving descriptions of what these people were going through in their lives. And it really allowed our client to look inside the position people were taking. We also find storytelling is wonderful for setting context, creating respect at the beginning of a process. A lot of people use it in place-based, when they're going to change a place, asking people about, what they value and treasure about a place. Great stuff for the start. And I've kind of thrown in there registering for updates, because quite often people just want to register, they're interested and get updates through the project. There are other tools you might use right throughout the life of a project. People don't always wake up to a project during your consultative phases. Quite often people will suddenly become interested when you're not actually talking, and the web does give us that ability to keep a dialogue going with people right through the life of a project with very low maintenance. And the sorts of things I'm thinking about here are news feeds, throwing out the odd quick poll to test the temperature of the community, having a contact us form so that people can contact you at any time, and a question and answer tool. And again, I'll just quickly show you what that might look like. This is one for Vancouver Airport, where they're inviting the community to ask their questions and they're getting answers from the community. There are pages and pages of this stuff, and it creates a very transparent record that they are being responsive to the community throughout a project. And frankly, and we'll get to risk management later, it's good risk management because it stops the community going elsewhere to get their answers. And those are tools you might use right through the life of a project. And then, of course, there's the consultative phase, which is where I suspect most of you do most of your work, where you're talking to people about getting their input. And in those places, discussion forums, surveys, mapping if there's a spatial dimension, and submissions tools are all really valuable. So before I be quiet and hand over to Kristin, I just wanted to sort of really get across that there's a whole plethora of online tools out there. Don't be led by the technology, be led by the practice, be led by what you need for your project. And, don't throw away the idea of deploying more than one tool, and particularly thinking about different phases of your project, because these things, as Kristin's going to cover, are abundant out there. There's lots of stuff you can do and bring into your practice, but it does need to fit in the overall scheme of things. There's no point in asking people for their ideas when you're discussing a draft. There's no point in asking people to discuss something in a forum when you're at a point where you're trying to inform them about what you've already decided. So it's about picking and choosing techniques just as you do in face-to-face practice. So I'm going to go back up a couple of slides to our agenda. And hand over to Kristin to talk about accessibility and participation, unless there are any questions.
So Matt, I don't see any questions at this point in time. I think everyone's taking it all in, so I think we're okay to go to Kristin, but I will remind everybody that they can raise their hand if they have a question, or they can just put a question in the question box and we'll bring that into the mix. So Kristin, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. Can you skip forward a couple of slides? Before we jump to the equity, I wanted to just talk about the tools piece for just a minute. So if you skip over that slide, I think they're slightly out of order. Go one more. There we go. So before I jump to the equity, I wanted to just piggyback on Matt's discussion about tool selection and just show you some examples of online tools so that you have some context for at least what I'm talking about when we talk about online tools. So this first slide shows